Galactic Defense Academy's shooting range buzzed with the usual mixture of excitement and tension that came with final evaluations. Cadets from 17 different species clustered around the advanced targeting stations, their various forms of breathing apparatus, sensory organs, and limbs creating a kaleidoscope of alien physiology. The air recyclers worked overtime to accommodate the different atmospheric requirements, creating small pockets of specialized environment around each species group. Lieutenant Commander Zefter, a towering Krillian with crystalline scales that shifted color with his mood, watched the proceedings with 4 independently moving eyes. His scales currently displayed the deep purple of focused attention mixed with streaks of orange skepticism. As the Academy's chief marksmanship instructor, he had seen thousands of cadets attempt to qualify for the elite sniper corps, but today's batch was particularly interesting. The Volari cadets moved with their characteristic fluid grace, their 6 arms allowing them to manipulate multiple targeting computers simultaneously, while their echolocation-based sight system gave them incredible precision. Their performance was, as expected, exemplary. The hegemony prided itself on producing the finest marksmen in known space, and the Volari lived up to that reputation with mechanical precision. Nearby, the insectoid Thrixxi cadets worked in perfect synchronization, their hive-mind connection allowing for instantaneous coordination and shared sensory input. When one aimed, they all benefited from the collective calculation of wind speed, atmospheric density, and gravitational variance. Their success rate was mathematically beautiful to observe. The lone human cadet stood apart from the others, not by choice, but by the simple fact that her species' breathing patterns seemed to fascinate and amuse her fellow students. Sarah Chen was compact and unremarkable by human standards, with dark hair pulled back in a regulation bun and brown eyes that seemed to take in everything without revealing her thoughts. What set her apart was not her appearance, but the way she breathed. Every few seconds, Sarah would take a deep, measured breath, hold it for exactly 4 counts, then release it slowly over 6 counts. The pattern never varied. The Volari found this hilarious, their musical laughter creating harmonic frequencies that resonated through their specialized breathing apparatus. To them, breathing was a constant, unconscious process that never interfered with their precision shooting. The idea that a sentient species would need to consciously control their oxygen intake struck them as primitively amusing. "Look at the human," chittered Cadet Velthari, her voice carrying the melodious undertones that made Volari's speech sound like music. "She breathes like she's afraid the atmosphere will run away. How can anyone focus on targeting calculations when they're so busy managing basic life functions?" The other Volari joined in the gentle mockery, their 6 arms gesturing in flowing patterns that emphasized their amusement. They weren't cruel, merely puzzled by what seemed to them an inefficient biological design. Their own respiratory systems worked independently of conscious thought, leaving their considerable mental capacity free to focus entirely on the complex mathematics of long-range shooting. The Thrixxi, through their hive connection, shared the amusement as a collective emotional experience. Their compound eyes tracked Sarah's movement with the precision of living computers, and their shared consciousness found the human's breathing ritual to be an interesting but ultimately pointless biological quirk. To beings who shared sensory input and could process targeting data through multiple neural networks simultaneously, the human's solitary, methodical approach seemed almost quaint. Sarah ignored the subtle ridicule with practiced ease. She had spent 3 years at the academy learning to tune out the well-meaning but condescending attitudes of her alien classmates. Humans were newcomers to the galactic community, having achieved faster-than-light travel only 2 centuries ago. Their biology was considered primitive by galactic standards, their technology derivative, and their military tactics unsophisticated. Most species viewed humans as eager students who showed promise, but would never quite measure up to the established powers. The shooting range itself was a marvel of galactic engineering, capable of simulating any environment found on the thousands of inhabited worlds within the hegemony. Today's test would cycle through 5 different scenarios, each designed to challenge a different aspect of marksmanship. The first stage simulated the windswept canyons of Zirian Prime, where unpredictable air currents could deflect even energy-based projectiles. The second recreated the zero-gravity asteroid fields of the Kepler Mining Consortium, where the absence of atmospheric resistance created its own unique challenges. The third stage replicated the thick, soup-like atmosphere of Gyros, where visibility was limited and projectiles moved through dense medium that could alter trajectory in unexpected ways. The fourth simulation recreated the magnetic storm environments of Epsilon Forge, where electromagnetic interference could disrupt targeting systems and cause energy weapons to behave unpredictably. The final stage was the ultimate test, a recreation of battlefield conditions on Kythera, where multiple environmental factors combined to create a nightmare scenario for long-range shooting. As the cadets prepared for the first stage, Lieutenant Commander Zefter's attention was drawn to movement at the observation deck. Captain Reese Morrison, the Academy's human liaison and the only human to ever achieve the rank of sniper captain in galactic military history, had arrived to observe the testing. Morrison was a legend in military circles, though most non-humans attributed his success to luck rather than skill. His presence immediately changed the atmosphere in the room. Morrison was a small man by human standards, with graying hair and weathered features that spoke of decades spent in hostile environments. His uniform bore decorations from conflicts most cadets had only read about in tactical studies. The Siege of Proxima, the liberation of the Andorian colonies, the Battle of the Nexus Gate. Morrison had been there for all of them, and his confirmed kill count was the stuff of military legend. Still, to most observers, he remained an anomaly rather than a demonstration of human potential. The captain's eyes immediately found Sarah among the assembled cadets, and he settled into the observation position with the patient stillness of a professional sniper. His presence went unnoticed by most of the alien cadets, who were too focused on their preparations and their amusement at human breathing patterns to pay attention to the observation deck. Sarah began her final equipment check with the same methodical precision she applied to her breathing. Her weapon was a standard-issue hegemony pulse rifle, modified with human-designed optics that compensated for her species' limited sensory range compared to most galactic species. The rifle was reliable but unremarkable, lacking the specialized features that other species had developed to complement their unique physiologies. While the Volari cadets synchronized their six-armed weapon handling with flowing, dance-like movements, and the Thrixxi shared targeting data through their neural connections, Sarah simply stood still and breathed. In, hold, out. In, hold, out. The pattern never changed, and with each cycle, something subtle shifted in her posture, in the way she held her weapon, in the quality of her attention to the environment around her. The first simulation began with a low hum as the range's holographic projectors created the windswept landscape of Zirian Prime. Immediately, the artificial wind generators spun up to speed, creating the chaotic air currents that made the planet notorious among snipers. Dust and debris swirled through the air, and the targeting displays showed wind speeds varying from 15 to 40 kilometers per hour in seemingly random patterns. The Volari cadets responded immediately, their enhanced sensory organs analyzing the wind patterns while their internal computers calculated optimal firing solutions. Their shots were precise and well calculated, hitting targets with admirable accuracy despite the challenging conditions. The Thrixxi Collective processed the environmental data through multiple neural networks, their shared consciousness allowing them to predict wind pattern changes with remarkable accuracy. Sarah continued to breathe. The other cadets had already taken their first shots and were analyzing their results when Sarah finally raised her weapon. But instead of immediately engaging the targeting system, she simply stood there, weapon ready but not yet aimed, breathing her steady rhythm while her eyes tracked something the others couldn't see. "What is she waiting for?" wondered Cadet Thixra, her compound eyes glittering with confusion. "The targeting computer has already provided optimal firing solutions. Why doesn't she shoot?" The Volari watched with growing amusement as Sarah remained motionless, her breathing pattern unchanged, her weapon tracking slowly across the simulated landscape without firing. To them, it seemed as though she was paralyzed by the complexity of the shooting problem, unable to process the environmental variables quickly enough to engage effectively. From the observation deck, Captain Morrison leaned forward slightly, his experienced eyes recognizing something the cadets missed. His fingers drummed once against the railing, the only sign of his sudden increased interest in the proceedings below. Sarah's breathing continued, steady and measured, while her eyes tracked invisible patterns in the swirling dust and debris. The wind generators created chaos, but within that chaos, she was finding something else entirely. Something that the sophisticated sensors and targeting computers of her alien classmates were missing in their rush to calculate and shoot. She was reading the wind itself, not just measuring its speed and direction, but understanding its rhythm, its personality, its tendency to shift and change in patterns that followed laws more subtle than simple physics. Her breathing wasn't a limitation or a biological quirk. It was a tool, a way of syncing herself with the environment that surrounded her, of becoming part of the ecosystem of forces that would determine where her shots would go. The ridicule of her classmates faded into background noise as Sarah finally began to aim, her movements deliberate and unhurried, her breathing pattern never wavering as she prepared to show them what they had misunderstood about human marksmanship. Sarah's first shot rang out across the simulated canyon of Zirian Prime, cutting through the artificial wind with a sharp crack that seemed to slice the chaotic air currents themselves. The energy pulse tracked straight and true, threading between two dust devils and compensating for a sudden wind shear that the computer models hadn't predicted. The target, a small drone meant to simulate enemy reconnaissance equipment, disintegrated in a shower of sparks and debris. The shooting range fell silent. The Volari cadets' melodious chatter stopped mid-harmonic, their 6 arms freezing in position as they processed what they had just witnessed. The Thrixxi collective experienced a moment of shared confusion that rippled through their neural network like a stone dropped in still water. Even Lieutenant Commander Zefter's crystalline scales shifted from their usual instructional purple to the pale blue of surprise. Sarah's target had been moving erratically through the simulated wind patterns, designed to challenge even the most advanced targeting systems. The Volari cadets had managed respectable accuracy rates of 60 to 70%, considered excellent under the circumstances. The Thrixxi collective had achieved an impressive 75% hit rate through their shared processing power. Sarah had just achieved what appeared to be an impossible shot, hitting a target that the computer predicted had less than a 15% probability of being successfully engaged given the current environmental conditions. But what truly unsettled the observers was not just the accuracy of the shot, but the way Sarah had achieved it. While her classmates had relied on sophisticated targeting computers, atmospheric sensors, and in the case of the Thrixxi collective neural processing, Sarah had used nothing but her own eyes and her steady, rhythmic breathing to read the wind patterns and calculate the shot. Probability of successful engagement was 14.7%, announced the range's automated system in its neutral mechanical voice. Shot deviation from predicted trajectory, 0.03%. Exceptional accuracy achieved through manual targeting. The phrase manual targeting hung in the air like an accusation. In an age where computer-assisted aiming was considered not just normal but necessary for military-grade accuracy, the idea that someone would deliberately eschew technological assistance seemed almost primitive. Yet the results spoke for themselves. Cadet Velthari's harmonic voice carried a note of confusion that her translator struggled to convey. How did she calculate for the atmospheric compression variance in Sector 7? Our sensors didn't detect the thermal layering until 3 seconds after her shot. Sarah lowered her weapon and resumed her breathing pattern, her expression revealing nothing of whatever mental processes had guided her shot. She didn't respond to the question, partly because she wasn't entirely sure how to explain what she had done, and partly because she was already focusing on the next target. From the observation deck, Captain Morrison allowed himself a small smile. He recognized what he was seeing, though he knew the alien cadets would struggle to understand it. It was something uniquely human, something that couldn't be programmed into computers or shared through neural networks. It was intuition married to experience, biological awareness enhanced by years of practice, the kind of shooting that came from understanding that marksmanship was as much art as science. The second target appeared, this one moving in a complex pattern that seemed designed to exploit the limitations of computer-based prediction models. It would accelerate and decelerate randomly, change direction without apparent logic, and occasionally disappear behind cover before emerging at unexpected angles. The challenge was not just hitting a moving target, but anticipating where it would be when standard prediction algorithms failed. The Volari cadets engaged with their characteristic precision, their targeting computers working overtime to calculate possible trajectories. Their hit rate dropped to 40% as the unpredictable movement patterns overwhelmed their predictive models. The Thrixxi collective fared better, using their shared processing power to run multiple scenario calculations simultaneously, achieving a 55% success rate through brute force computational power. Sarah continued her steady breathing, watching the target's movement with the same patient attention she had given to the wind patterns. To the casual observer, it might have seemed like she was hesitating, paralyzed by the complexity of the targeting problem. But Captain Morrison could see what she was really doing, learning the target's personality. Every pilot, every drone operator, every automated system had quirks, patterns of behavior that revealed themselves over time. Humans had learned, through millennia of hunting and warfare, to read these patterns not through mathematical analysis, but through something more fundamental. They could sense the rhythm beneath apparent randomness, find the logic hidden in chaos. Sarah's second shot came without warning, released between one breath and the next. The energy pulse seemed to bend through the air, following a trajectory that defied the targeting computer's prediction models. It intercepted the target at a point where no mathematical model would have predicted its presence, yet there it was, vaporizing in another shower of sparks and debris. Probability of successful engagement, 11.2%, the automated system announced with what almost sounded like confusion. Shot trajectory analysis indicates target interception occurred at predicted location variance of -47%. Manual targeting achievement confirmed. The silence that followed was deeper this time, charged with a different quality of attention. This was no longer just curiosity about an unusual alien physiology. This was recognition that they were witnessing something they didn't understand, something that challenged their assumptions about how accurate shooting was supposed to work. Lieutenant Commander Zefter's scales had shifted to the deep gold of intense interest mixed with academic fascination. He had seen many exceptional marksmen in his career, beings whose natural gifts and technological enhancements allowed them to achieve remarkable accuracy. But he had never seen anyone consistently exceed computer-predicted probability thresholds while using purely manual targeting methods. The third target materialized as the simulation shifted to recreate the dense atmospheric conditions of gyros. Here, the challenge was visibility rather than wind. The thick, soup-like atmosphere scattered light in unpredictable ways, creating false images and making it nearly impossible to distinguish real targets from atmospheric distortions. Standard protocol called for enhanced optical sensors and radar-assisted targeting to cut through the interference. The Volari cadets immediately switched to their technological solutions, their weapons bristling with sensor arrays designed to penetrate atmospheric interference. Their hit rate recovered to 60%, as their equipment compensated for the challenging visibility conditions. The Thrixxi Collective used their compound eye's natural ability to process multiple spectrums of light simultaneously, maintaining their 55% accuracy through biological adaptation rather than technology. Sarah made no adjustments to her equipment. She continued breathing in her steady rhythm, but now her eyes seemed to unfocus slightly, as if she were looking through the atmospheric distortion rather than trying to pierce it. She raised her weapon and held it steady, not aiming at any visible target, but pointing into what appeared to be empty, distorted air. "There's nothing there," whispered Cadet Zixtai, her translator rendering the Thrixxi Collective's shared confusion into audible words. "The atmospheric distortion is too dense. How can she aim at something she cannot see?" Sarah's breathing pattern shifted slightly, the rhythm remaining the same but the depth changing, as if she were drawing in more than just the artificial atmosphere of the shooting range. She seemed to be breathing in information, processing the environment through senses that her classmates didn't recognize as legitimate data sources. Her third shot fired into what every sensor and every computer insisted was empty space. The energy pulse disappeared into the dense atmospheric simulation, and for a moment, it seemed as though Sarah had finally made an error, had allowed the challenging conditions to overcome her mysterious targeting ability. Then the target materialized exactly where her shot had been aimed, emerging from behind atmospheric distortion that had hidden it from every other detection method in use. The energy pulse struck it dead center, vaporizing it before any of the other cadets had even realized it was there. Probability of successful engagement under current atmospheric conditions, 8.9%, the system announced, and this time there was definitely confusion in its mechanical voice. Target acquisition achieved through unknown methodology, manual targeting confirmed. The range had become completely silent now, the usual sounds of preparation and equipment adjustment replaced by an atmosphere of growing wonder and uncertainty. The alien cadets were beginning to understand that they were witnessing something unprecedented, something that challenged everything they thought they knew about the limitations of human capability. Captain Morrison's smile had grown wider, though he kept it carefully hidden from the cadets below. He had seen this before, in combat situations where technology failed and only human instinct could bridge the gap between probable and possible. It was the reason humans had survived on their hostile homeworld, the reason they had managed to carve out a place in galactic civilization despite their apparent biological limitations. Sarah lowered her weapon and returned to her breathing pattern, completely unaware of the storm of confusion and growing respect she was generating around her. She was focused entirely on the next challenge, already reading the environmental changes as the simulation prepared to shift to the electromagnetic interference conditions of Epsilon Forge. The fourth stage would test everything she had demonstrated so far, combining movement, atmospheric interference, and electromagnetic disruption that would render most technological aids useless. It was designed to be the great equalizer, the challenge that would force everyone back to basics and reveal who truly understood marksmanship at its most fundamental level. As the simulation environment began to change, Sarah's breathing rhythm remained constant, steady as a heartbeat, reliable as gravity. Whatever she was doing, whatever mysterious human ability she was demonstrating, it was about to face its greatest test yet. The electromagnetic storm simulation of Epsilon Forge descended upon the shooting range like a technological apocalypse. Crackling arcs of artificial lightning split the air, while invisible electromagnetic pulses swept through the area in chaotic waves that sent targeting computers into error cascades. The sophisticated sensor arrays that the Volari cadets relied upon began displaying nonsensical readings, their displays flickering between false positives and complete system failures. The Thrixxi collective found their shared neural processing disrupted, their hive connection fragmenting under the electromagnetic interference like a radio signal breaking up in a thunderstorm. Emergency lighting bathed everything in an eerie red glow as the range's primary illumination systems struggled to maintain coherence under the simulated magnetic storm conditions. The air itself seemed to vibrate with electromagnetic energy, creating an atmosphere that was as much about psychological pressure as physical challenge. Lieutenant Commander Zefter watched his most promising cadets struggle with equipment that had been reduced to expensive paperweights. The Volari were forced to rely on their natural senses for the first time in the evaluation, and their accuracy plummeted to barely 20% as they grappled with the unfamiliar concept of shooting without computer assistance. The Thrixxi collective, cut off from their shared processing network, found themselves functioning as individuals for the first time in their lives, their hit rate dropping even lower as they struggled with the alien concept of making targeting decisions without consensus. Sarah stood in the center of the electromagnetic chaos like an island of calm in a sea of technological confusion. While sophisticated targeting systems failed around her, and alien cadets struggled with darkened displays and error messages, her breathing pattern remained absolutely unchanged. If anything, she seemed more relaxed now, as if the removal of technological interference had somehow made her task easier rather than harder. Captain Morrison leaned forward in the observation deck, his weathered face illuminated by the red emergency lighting. This was the moment he had been waiting for, the test that would reveal whether what he was seeing was truly exceptional or just an interesting anomaly. In his experience, electromagnetic warfare was where human troops truly shined, where their biological resilience and intuitive capabilities gave them advantages that no amount of advanced technology could replicate. The targets in this simulation were different from the previous challenges. Instead of simple drones or moving objects, they were electronic warfare emitters designed to simulate enemy communication nodes and sensor arrays. Destroying them required not just accuracy, but the ability to distinguish between real targets and electromagnetic decoys that existed only as false signatures designed to confuse automated targeting systems. The Volari cadets fired frantically at phantom signals, their shots going wide as they aimed at electromagnetic ghosts that existed only in their malfunctioning sensor arrays. Their musical voices had taken on discordant notes of frustration as they struggled to adapt to conditions their training had never adequately prepared them for. The Thrixxi, separated from their collective processing power, made hesitant, uncertain shots that betrayed their lack of experience functioning as individuals. Sarah raised her weapon with the same deliberate calm she had shown throughout the evaluation. But now, instead of relying on any technological assistance, she was operating purely on biological capability. Her eyes tracked across the chaotic electromagnetic environment, reading patterns that weren't visible to computer sensors or alien sensory organs adapted to different environments. Her first shot in the electromagnetic storm struck a target that her classmates' sensors insisted wasn't there. The real emitter, hidden behind a cloud of false electromagnetic signatures, disintegrated under her precise fire while alien targeting systems continued to track the decoy signals it had been projecting. Target acquisition method unknown, the range computer announced, its mechanical voice distorted by electromagnetic interference. Electronic countermeasures successfully penetrated through non-technological means. The phrase non-technological means sent a ripple of disbelief through the assembled cadets. In galactic civilization, the idea that biological senses could outperform sophisticated electronic systems was not just unlikely, it was considered practically impossible. Their entire military doctrine was built around technological superiority and electronic warfare capabilities that should have made organic targeting obsolete. Cadet Velthari's harmonic voice carried a note of something approaching panic. How is she distinguishing real targets from false signatures without spectrum analysis? Our sensors can't penetrate the electromagnetic interference patterns. Sarah's second shot followed quickly, striking another hidden emitter with the same impossible accuracy. She was moving through the simulation as if the electromagnetic chaos that had reduced sophisticated alien technology to uselessness was nothing more than a mild distraction. Her breathing pattern remained steady, and her movements were economical and precise. But it was her third shot that truly shattered the alien cadets' understanding of what they were witnessing. The target she engaged wasn't just hidden behind electromagnetic interference. It was actively employing adaptive camouflage that changed its emissions signature every few seconds to match background radiation patterns. Even if their targeting computers had been functioning perfectly, the chameleon-like target would have been nearly impossible to track. Sarah's shot struck the adaptive emitter during a signature transition, at the precise moment when its camouflage system was switching patterns and was therefore most vulnerable. The timing required to achieve this was measured in milliseconds, yet somehow she had anticipated the exact moment to fire based on nothing more than observation and intuition. Adaptive camouflage system defeated, the computer announced with what sounded like electronic bewilderment. Timing precision, 0.004 seconds. Achievement parameters exceed programmed possibility thresholds. Lieutenant Commander Zefter's scales had now shifted to a pattern none of the cadets had ever seen before, a swirling mixture of gold fascination and silver respect that indicated a fundamental shift in his understanding of what he was observing. As a seasoned military instructor, he had seen remarkable marksmanship before, but never had he witnessed someone consistently performing at levels that exceeded not just expectations but mathematical probability models. From the observation deck, Captain Morrison finally spoke, his voice carrying clearly through the electromagnetic chaos. She's reading the interference patterns themselves. The electromagnetic distortion isn't hiding the targets from her, it's revealing them. His words fell into the sudden silence like stones into deep water. The concept was so foreign to galactic military thinking that it took several moments for the alien cadets to process what he had said. The idea that interference could be used as a detection method rather than an obstacle required a complete reversal of conventional tactical thinking. Sarah was now moving through the simulation with increasing confidence, engaging targets that remained invisible to everyone else in the room. Her shots came in a steady rhythm that matched her breathing pattern, each one finding its mark with mechanical precision despite the complete absence of technological assistance. She wasn't fighting the electromagnetic storm. She was dancing with it, using the chaos itself as a source of information about hidden targets and concealed threats. The fourth target she engaged was positioned behind a barrier that should have made it completely immune to direct fire. The electromagnetic emissions from the barrier created a dead zone where no conventional sensor could penetrate, and no energy weapon should have been able to maintain coherence. Yet Sarah's shot somehow curved around the interference, following a path that defied understanding, but resulted in another perfect target destruction. Impossible shot trajectory confirmed, the computer announced, its voice now carrying a distinctly confused tone. Energy pulse maintained coherence through electromagnetic dead zone using unknown principles. The Volari cadets had stopped even attempting to engage targets, instead focusing their attention entirely on Sarah's performance. Their six-armed physiology, evolved for precision manipulation and mathematical calculation, seemed suddenly primitive compared to whatever biological capability the human was demonstrating. The Thrixxi collective, still fragmented by electromagnetic interference, experienced something like collective awe as their individual perspectives tried to process what they were witnessing. As the fourth simulation stage drew to a close, Sarah had achieved a perfect accuracy rate under conditions that had reduced every other cadet to less than 10% effectiveness. She had done it without technology, without enhanced senses, without any of the advantages that galactic civilization considered essential for modern warfare. The electromagnetic storm began to fade as the simulation prepared to transition to the final challenge, the nightmare battlefield conditions of Kythera, where every previous environmental challenge would be combined into the ultimate test of marksmanship capability. This was the evaluation that typically broke even the most promising cadets, the simulation that had a failure rate approaching 90%. Sarah lowered her weapon as the electromagnetic interference dissipated, her breathing pattern never having wavered throughout the chaos. She seemed completely unaffected by what she had just accomplished, already focusing her attention on the environmental changes that would herald the beginning of the final challenge. Captain Morrison's smile had become openly proud now, though he was careful to keep his expression neutral for the benefit of the alien observers. He knew what was coming next, and he had a feeling that the final simulation would complete the transformation of ridicule into something approaching reverence. The shooting range fell silent except for the soft hum of systems preparing for the ultimate challenge, and Sarah's steady breathing continued like a countdown to something extraordinary. The final simulation materialized around them like a descent into mechanical hell. The Kythera battlefield recreation was legendary among military academies throughout the galaxy, not just for its difficulty, but for its psychological impact on cadets who experienced it. The simulation combined every environmental challenge from the previous stages into a single, overwhelming scenario that pushed the limits of what any marksman, regardless of species or technological enhancement, could reasonably be expected to handle. Hurricane-force winds howled through the artificial environment, carrying debris that could deflect energy pulses and obscure vision. The atmosphere was thick with the choking dust and chemical fog that had made the actual Battle of Kythera a nightmare for both sides. Electromagnetic interference crackled through the air in unpredictable patterns, while gravitational anomalies created pockets where projectiles would curve in impossible directions. Emergency lighting flickered sporadically, creating a strobing effect that disoriented vision and made target acquisition nearly impossible. But the true horror of the Kythera simulation wasn't the environmental challenges, it was the targets themselves. Unlike the static objectives and predictable drones of the previous stages, this simulation featured fully autonomous combat units that fought back. Enemy snipers took cover behind shifting debris, their own weapons seeking to eliminate the cadets even as they tried to complete their marksmanship evaluation. Artillery simulators created explosive distractions at random intervals, while electronic warfare units attempted to hack into the cadets' equipment and turn their own technology against them. The Volari cadets, already shaken by their poor performance in the electromagnetic storm simulation, found themselves completely overwhelmed by the multifaceted assault on their senses. Their six-armed coordination, so elegant under controlled conditions, became a liability as they struggled to process multiple threats simultaneously, while their targeting computers provided contradictory information. Their musical communication became discordant and panicked as they called out warnings about targets that might or might not be real. The Thrixxi collective, their hive connection still fragmented from the electromagnetic interference, faced the ultimate test of individual capability. For beings who had never made an independent decision without group consensus, the requirement to engage multiple hostiles while under fire pushed them beyond their psychological breaking point. Their compound eyes, capable of processing multiple spectrums of information, became overloaded by the sheer volume of environmental data and began shutting down non-essential visual processing to prevent complete sensory collapse. Lieutenant Commander Zefter watched his best students crumble under conditions that the actual Battle of Kithara veterans described as a mild recreation compared to the real thing. His crystalline scales had shifted to the deep red of concern, mixed with the orange of frustrated recognition that this simulation might be beyond the capabilities of this year's class. In the chaos of simulated warfare, Sarah remained a point of absolute stillness. While explosions rocked the environment around her and hostile fire sought her position, her breathing pattern continued unchanged. In, hold, out. In, hold, out. The rhythm was so constant, so unaffected by the bedlam surrounding her, that it began to seem like a form of meditation rather than simple respiratory function. Captain Morrison leaned forward on the observation deck, his experienced eyes tracking the tactical situation below. He had fought in the actual Battle of Kithara, had seen good soldiers break under conditions less challenging than this simulation. He knew what it took to maintain operational effectiveness in an environment that seemed designed to overwhelm every human sense and instinct. Sarah's first engagement came without warning. A sniper unit had taken position behind cover that should have made it invisible to conventional detection, its adaptive camouflage and electromagnetic shielding rendering it effectively immune to the sensor arrays that the other cadets relied upon. The hostile's weapon was already tracking toward Cadet Velthari, who was struggling with malfunctioning targeting systems and hadn't detected the threat. Sarah's shot cut through the chaos like a surgical instrument, threading between debris clouds and electromagnetic interference to strike the enemy sniper's weapon just as it was about to fire. The precision was stunning, not just hitting a concealed target, but hitting a specific component of that target to neutralize the threat without causing a catastrophic explosion that might endanger the Volari cadet nearby. The enemy sniper's weapon disintegrated, leaving the hostile unit temporarily disoriented but alive, exactly as military protocol dictated for training exercises. The shot had required not just exceptional accuracy, but perfect understanding of the target's construction and vulnerability points. Threat neutralization achieved through precision component targeting, the computer announced, its voice barely audible over the simulated combat sounds. Accuracy parameters, exceptional. Tactical awareness, superior. But Sarah's performance was just beginning. As the simulation progressed, she moved through the chaotic battlefield like she was following a choreographed dance routine. Her shots came in steady intervals that matched her breathing pattern, each one finding targets that remained invisible to everyone else. Enemy artillery units fell silent as she disabled their targeting systems. Electronic warfare installations lost power as she severed their connection cables with impossible precision. Hostile snipers found their positions compromised, as she somehow detected them through concealment that should have been impenetrable. What truly amazed the observers was not just her accuracy, but her tactical awareness. Sarah wasn't just hitting targets. She was reading the battlefield like a tactical manual written in 3 dimensions. She anticipated where enemies would move before they moved there, predicted where threats would emerge before they became visible, and engaged targets in a sequence that demonstrated perfect understanding of battlefield priority and threat assessment. Cadet Velthari, who had been struggling with multiple system failures and environmental challenges, suddenly found her path cleared as Sarah systematically eliminated the threats that had been suppressing the Volari cadet's position. The precision was surgical. Each shot removed exactly the obstacle that was preventing Velthari from completing her own objectives, without ever interfering with the alien cadet's line of fire or putting her in additional danger. "She's not just shooting," whispered Cadet Thixra through the Thrixxi Collective's fragmented connection. "She's conducting the entire battlefield. How can she track so many variables simultaneously without technological assistance?" The question hung in the air unanswered because none of the observers, alien or human, fully understood what they were witnessing. Sarah was demonstrating something that went beyond individual marksmanship, beyond personal capability, beyond anything that military doctrine considered possible for a single combatant. Her breathing pattern served as the metronome for the entire engagement. Each inhale brought in environmental data that she processed through senses that seemed to extend far beyond normal human physiology. Each exhale released shots that found their targets with mathematical precision, despite the chaos surrounding her. She was breathing in the battlefield and exhaling solutions to tactical problems. 27 minutes into the simulation, something unprecedented happened. The computer announced a battlefield status that had never been achieved by any cadet in the history of the Kythera simulation. All hostile units neutralized. Battlefield control established. Mission parameters exceeded. The simulation environment began to fade as emergency lighting was replaced by normal illumination, but the silence that followed was deeper than anything that had come before. The alien cadets stood among their malfunctioning equipment, staring at Sarah as if seeing a member of her species for the first time. Lieutenant Commander Zefter's scales displayed a pattern that his students had never seen, a swirling mixture of respect, wonder, and something approaching awe. Sarah lowered her weapon and returned to her relaxed stance, her breathing pattern finally shifting back to a more normal rhythm as the artificial battlefield stress faded away. She seemed completely unaware that she had just rewritten the Academy's understanding of what was possible in the realm of combat marksmanship. From the observation deck, Captain Morrison's voice carried clearly through the stunned silence. "Computer, display final accuracy statistics for all participants." The numbers that appeared on the display screens told a story that challenged everything the Galactic military thought it knew about human capability. While the other cadets had struggled to maintain accuracy rates above 20% under the combined environmental challenges, Sarah had achieved 97% accuracy while simultaneously demonstrating tactical awareness and threat prioritization that exceeded the performance parameters of most seasoned combat veterans. But the most important number wasn't displayed on any screen. It was the transformation in how every alien in that room now viewed the steady, rhythmic breathing that they had ridiculed just hours earlier. The Academy's advanced briefing amphitheater had never hosted a gathering quite like this one. Representatives from 17 different species sat in carefully arranged atmospheric zones, their various forms of breathing apparatus and environmental suits creating a symphony of mechanical sounds that served as background to the most important tactical discussion in recent galactic military history. The emergency session had been called by the Hegemony High Command after preliminary reports of the marksmanship evaluation reached the upper echelons of military leadership. Admiral Kethmoran, a distinguished Volari whose 6 arms moved in the flowing patterns that indicated deep contemplation, reviewed the combat data with growing amazement. Her harmonic voice carried throughout the amphitheater as she addressed the assembled military leaders. The tactical implications of what we witnessed transcend simple marksmanship capability. This human demonstrated battlefield awareness that our most advanced AI systems struggle to replicate. The holographic display at the center of the amphitheater showed a detailed breakdown of Sarah's performance in the Kythera simulation. 3-dimensional models rotated slowly, illustrating trajectory paths that had seemed impossible, target acquisitions that had defied sensor limitations, and tactical decisions that had demonstrated prescient awareness of battlefield developments. General Vrixhai of the Thrixxi Collective leaned forward, his compound eyes reflecting the holographic data as his neural connection shared the information with distant hive clusters. Our collective processing networks analyzed her performance patterns. She consistently anticipated enemy movements 3 to 4 seconds before our predictive algorithms identified the same tactical developments. The implications for combat effectiveness are staggering. Captain Morrison stood at the presentation podium, his weathered face composed as he faced an audience of beings who had spent centuries assuming that human military capability was limited by biological inferiority. The decorations on his uniform caught the amphitheater's lighting, each medal representing conflicts where human soldiers had exceeded expectations despite technological disadvantages. "With respect, distinguished members of the High Command," Morrison began, his voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who had earned his credibility through combat rather than politics. "What you witnessed yesterday wasn't an anomaly. It was a demonstration of capabilities that human military doctrine has been developing for centuries, capabilities that we've been reluctant to discuss openly because we knew they would be difficult for our galactic allies to understand or accept." The statement sent a ripple of surprise through the assembled military leaders. The idea that humans had been deliberately concealing military capabilities was contrary to every assumption about their integration into galactic society. Most species had viewed human participation in galactic military operations as a learning experience for the newcomers, not as a contribution of unique value. Lieutenant Commander Zefter, invited to provide his instructor's perspective, activated his own presentation display. The human cadet's breathing pattern served as more than respiratory function. Analysis suggests it was a form of biological interface with environmental conditions, allowing her to process atmospheric, electromagnetic, and kinetic data through organic sensors that we don't fully understand. The holographic display shifted to show Sarah's biometric readings throughout the evaluation. Her heart rate, brainwave patterns, and respiratory rhythm had remained remarkably stable even under the extreme stress of the Kythera simulation. But more interesting were the subtle variations in her biological patterns that seemed to correlate directly with environmental changes and tactical developments. Computer analysis suggests that her breathing pattern synchronized with environmental frequencies in ways that enhanced sensory input beyond normal human parameters, Zefter continued. She was essentially using her entire respiratory system as a biological sensor array that complemented, and in some cases exceeded electronic detection capabilities. Admiral Kethmoran's 6 arms gestured in patterns that conveyed profound interest mixed with tactical calculation. If this capability is not unique to this individual human, if it represents trainable skills that other humans can develop, then we need to completely reevaluate human integration into galactic military operations. Captain Morrison nodded slowly. Admiral, what you're describing is exactly what human military doctrine has been working toward for the past 2 centuries. We call it biological warfare integration, the development of human capabilities that complement rather than compete with galactic technology. The captain activated his own display, showing training records from Earth's military academies. The data revealed systematic programs designed to enhance natural human abilities that galactic civilization had dismissed as primitive. Breathing techniques that enhanced sensory processing, meditation practices that improved tactical awareness, physical conditioning that optimized biological performance under stress. We learned early in our galactic integration that trying to match alien technological capabilities was a losing strategy, Morrison explained. Our technology would always be derivative, our sensors less sophisticated, our computational power inferior. So instead, we focused on developing the biological advantages that our evolutionary history gave us. General Vrixhi's neural connection carried his words to distant hive clusters even as he spoke. What biological advantages? Human physiology is considered primitive by galactic standards. Your sensory range is limited, your processing speed inferior to collective consciousness, your environmental adaptability restricted compared to most spacefaring species. Morrison's smile carried the satisfaction of someone about to reveal a carefully guarded secret. General, you're measuring human capability against the wrong parameters. You're correct that we can't match Volari precision or Thrixxi collective processing. But we evolved as persistence hunters on a world where survival required the ability to read environmental patterns, anticipate prey behavior, and maintain effectiveness under conditions that would break more specialized species. The holographic display shifted to show Earth's evolutionary history, focusing on the development of human hunting and warfare capabilities. Images of ancient humans tracking prey across vast distances, developing tools and tactics through pure observation and intuition, surviving in environments that had shaped them into biological generalists rather than specialists. Every human carries the genetic legacy of ancestors who survived by reading wind patterns to track prey, who anticipated weather changes days in advance, who could navigate by environmental cues that no technological sensor could detect, Morrison continued. What you witnessed in Cadet Chen's performance was not superhuman ability. It was simply human ability developed to its potential. The amphitheater fell silent as the implications began to sink in. The galactic military had been operating under the assumption that technological superiority was the only path to military effectiveness. The idea that biological capability could not just complement, but in some cases exceed technological solutions represented a fundamental challenge to established doctrine. Sarah herself entered the amphitheater at that moment, summoned to provide her own perspective on the performance that had shaken galactic military thinking. She moved with the same quiet confidence she had shown on the shooting range, her breathing pattern steady and controlled despite finding herself the center of attention for some of the most powerful military leaders in known space. Admiral Kethmoran addressed her directly, her harmonic voice carrying genuine curiosity. Cadet Chen, Can you explain how you achieved accuracy levels that exceeded our computer models while using manual targeting methods? Sarah considered the question carefully, aware that her answer might influence military doctrine for generations to come. Admiral, I'm not sure I can explain it in technical terms that would translate well. What I do isn't really manual targeting, it's more like having a conversation with the environment. The wind patterns, the electromagnetic interference, the movement of targets, they all have rhythms and personalities that you can learn to read if you know how to listen. She paused, searching for words to describe concepts that human military training had developed but never fully articulated. My breathing pattern isn't just about oxygen intake. It's about synchronizing my biological rhythms with environmental rhythms, finding the harmony between my internal state and external conditions. When I breathe with the environment instead of fighting against it, I can sense things that instruments can't detect and anticipate changes that computers can't predict. General Vrixhi's compound eyes reflected genuine fascination. You're describing a form of biological integration that our collective consciousness cannot replicate. Individual awareness merged with environmental systems in real time. The tactical applications are extraordinary. Captain Morrison stepped forward, his expression serious as he prepared to make the proposal that would change everything. Distinguished members of the High Command, I request permission to implement a joint training program that combines human biological warfare techniques with galactic technological capabilities. Our preliminary assessments suggest that integrated human-alien tactical teams could achieve effectiveness levels that exceed the sum of their individual capabilities. The proposal hung in the air like a challenge to centuries of established military doctrine. The idea of learning from human techniques, of treating human biology as an asset rather than a limitation, represented a complete reversal of traditional thinking about species integration in galactic military operations. Admiral Kethmoran's 6 arms moved in patterns that conveyed deep contemplation mixed with growing excitement. Captain Morrison, if your assessment is correct, if human biological capabilities can be integrated with our technological systems, then we're not just discussing improved marksmanship training. We're discussing a revolution in military effectiveness. Sarah's steady breathing continued throughout the discussion, her presence serving as a living reminder that the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy still had things to learn from the persistent hunters who had survived and thrived on a hostile world at the edge of known space. The ridicule that had greeted her breathing pattern just days before had been transformed into something approaching reverence. But more importantly, it had become the foundation for a new understanding of what was possible when biological capability and technological advancement worked in harmony rather than competition. 6 months later, the first integrated human-alien tactical units would begin operations with effectiveness levels that exceeded all projections. But in that moment, in the amphitheater where the future of galactic military doctrine was being rewritten, Sarah simply continued breathing in the steady rhythm that had revealed the hidden potential of humanity to civilizations that thought they had nothing left to learn.